Hey, welcome back. Just wanted to do that to see if it makes a thumbnail when I put it on my on the YouTube channel. But hey, I'm glad you're here. Glad you're watching. I should start out by saying I hope you're all doing okay. Um, we are entering the most insane part of the year, maybe one of the most insane parts of American history. The next 11 weeks are going to be absolute chaos. I promise you. Lots of weird things are going to happen that we can't even imagine right now. So I hope that you're finding ways of coping and staying healthy and staying good to yourself during this utterly bizarre time. We still don't know who our president is, and I literally have my um, New York Times uh, election results tracker constantly awake on my phone just in case they get the update because my anxiety will not let me put it down. If you're in the same state, um, I'm here with you. I want to talk about um, the last reading that we had to do, which was a podcast episode from a show called Love and Radio. If you haven't listened to that yet, don't just stop. Just don't listen to this video without having first listened to that podcast because it is so interesting and just off the chain bizarre. So this would ruin it, and you wouldn't really understand what we're talking about. So just pause it right now, go back and listen to that podcast episode. The link to it is in the syllabus. Um, okay, so if you paused it and went back and watched it and now have fast forwarded to this point, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. Wasn't it crazy? Um, so now I want to ask some more general questions that underlie some of the sort of bizarre ethical quandaries that arise in that episode. So we're going to go not more specific but more general and try to see what our ethical intuitions tell us about some of the issues that were raised in that episode and raised by questions about genetic engineering in general. And and that's what I want you to focus on in your next journal entry is answering some of the questions that I raise here. I will ask specific questions in this lecture, and I want you to address those in your journal. So let me start out by framing the discussion. The discussion that I want to have is centered on two questions. One question is, how much are we allowed morally? I don't mean allowed by God necessarily, but how much does morality allow us to tinker with human nature? How far is too far? And the second question, which is very related to the first but is not the same question, and oftentimes gets tangled up and people fail to realize that there's two different questions here. The second question is, what sort of methods are okay to use to tinker with humanity, with human nature? So the first question is a question of quantity, how much tinkering, and the second question is a question of quality. What kind of tinkering or what kind of tools are we allowed to apply to human nature or the nature of biological beings in general to change them, to alter them? So I want to start with a few thought experiments to sort of prime your intuition pump in your head, get it running. I want to ask you a few questions. First, imagine that some science lab, some company, Monsanto or whoever it is, came out with an announcement that they had created an entirely new kind of vegetable. Never existed before on the face of the earth, and it's delicious, it's pretty nutritious, we can grow it really easily, it's cheap, and we're putting it on the market. Would you be inclined to eat that vegetable, to try it, to eat much of it? Assuming that like the FDA has said, yeah, we don't see anything wrong with it, it's not going to give you cancer, there are no bizarre chemical elements to it that you don't find in other vegetables, it's just a brand new vegetable. Would you be inclined to eat that vegetable? Why or why not? Secondly, imagine that the same company, a different wing of the company, research wing, says, we've created an entirely new animal. Totally new. Did not exist on the face of the earth prior to us tinkering. And it's nice and furry and friendly, and we're going to sell them. They make good pets. Would you be inclined, if it was a friendly, you know, attractive, pet-looking creature, to make it your pet? This thing that has just come into existence out of nowhere, or just out of a lab that's tinkering with scientific tools. Why or why not? Those two examples might sound sort of sci-fi to you, but they're not. They're actually real live things that exist right now, and you're going to be disappointed when I tell you what I mean. The first thing, the vegetable that never existed before humans started tinkering around. I mean, nothing like this existed before humans started making it. Is corn. Corn is actually an extreme mutated version of uh, a grass. You know when you have like those long stalks of grass, sometimes it's called sawgrass or sweetgrass, and on the end of it there will be this little bundle of seeds, of kernels, almost like wheat. That is the ancestor of corn. And the way we got corn is by taking those grasses that produce the biggest and most of those kernels and breeding them together, and then breeding their descendants together with the ones that produce the most and the biggest, over and over and over and over and over and over and over the course of hundreds of years, uh, until we now have this this gigantic bundle of seeds, kernels, that you see on the end of a very large grass stalk. This was done by the Mesoamericans thousands of years ago. But, but corn is simply not a natural plant. It would never have existed without lots of very specific intentional human intervention. Now they may not have known exactly what it was going to look like, what the final process or product was going to look like, but the intention was to get bigger and bigger and more and more. And the result was this thing that um, comprises or that makes up uh, most of the sugar that you get, most of the carbon in your body. If we took your body and reduced it all to its carbonic elements and then looked at that carbon, there are uh, ways of sort of determining what that carbon came from in your diet. And the vast majority of the carbon in your body came from corn, which is a human invention. Now, your intuitions might be tingling a little more in the direction of the animal that I'm talking about. The animal, this animal that never would have existed without human intervention, but I want to know if you would have it as a pet, is the dog. Dogs don't exist in nature. Dogs are an invention of humanity. We took wild wolves, or yeah, I guess they were wolves, gray wolves and white wolves, um, and bred them together, bred the ones that had the traits that we liked together until we got something very different. Actually, wait a second. Whoops. 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 Sorry. Sorry. want to show you this. Okay. Y'all have seen Leia before. But this is what we got after several centuries of breeding. This is not a wolf. It has very few traits that are wolf-like. It has a general body form that's like a wolf, but it doesn't do wolf things. It can't exist alone in the wild. She would be eaten by a hawk or something. And if her wolf ancestors could see her, I mean, they would be just horrified at what their descendants had become. This is not a natural creature. Humans made these things. They're our invention. And you may say, well, that's not really an invention because we're just taking something and modifying it. But that's all inventions are. I mean, like, we don't just pull new things out of nowhere when we invent them. We take things that we have here in the world, we modify them, combine them, put them together in new ways, and we get new things. Go. Sorry I tricked you into coming back here. I had to say whoops, which means that I dropped something that's edible and to get her to come. And now she knows I lied to her, so I'm an asshole. But now she's like sniffing around looking for whatever it is. So if you were inclined to say no, I wouldn't eat this weird new vegetable that Monsanto created, or take this weird new invented animal into my house or into my life, you might already be there. You probably almost certainly are there with corn anyway. And if you don't have a dog, or if you have a dog, you're there too. Well, why don't we think that is? Why don't we think of these things as like immoral or morally problematic? You might say because they were created using natural methods. I'm not sure how it's natural. I mean, the breeding of wolves in a certain way wouldn't have happened naturally. We had to make them do that to get something so radically different. But at least you might say we're not like directly tinkering with, using machines and getting down at the level of their genes and changing them in ways that would not have happened, at least wouldn't have happened the same way in nature. So let's return to those first two questions I asked. How far are we allowed to change human nature or the biological nature of other things? And what tools are we allowed to use? So we've changed grass into corn, which is an extreme change. I mean, you can't breed corn back with the grasses that their ancestors were. It doesn't produce anything. So you changed it into a radically new type of organism. So that's a very far change. But you might not think there's anything wrong with that. It's human ingenuity, it's human intervention. It's not natural, but it's not bad. You might say the same thing about the dogs. Right? We've changed them, but we changed them using the sort of processes that they already engage in, like breeding, like mating, right? So maybe your intuition is, if you think that it's not wrong to make dogs out of wolves or to make corn out of grass, your intuition might be telling you that it's not about how much we change a thing, but it's about the methods we use to change it that are morally significant. So imagine if I said that instead of breeding creatures that already existed together to create something new that didn't exist before, imagine I said we have molecule by molecule pieced together a brand new organism that has no ancestor, that never would have existed on Earth, and that never did exist before this. It's totally new. It's like a new beginning of, tree of life starting with this thing. Would you think that that is ethically dubious, ethically suspicious? If so, um, that also has been done. We have organisms now, synthetic organisms, from the discipline that's called synthetic biology, that have no ancestors because we piece them together literally molecule by molecule. Hey, stop. Go away. Go. Oh, I gotta make her go away. Come here. Go outside. Go outside. So these things exist. These ancestralist organisms exist. And we created them with a totally unnatural process. Now, I don't like that distinction between natural and unnatural because I'm not sure anything like nature actually exists when you think about it long enough, but we can at least use the term a little bit now to distinguish between processes that occurred without humans involved and processes that could not have occurred without humans involved. This new organism was created by the same team that sequenced the human genome successfully. This new organism was created using laboratory processes that don't take place outside of laboratories in nature. This whole idea that that's nature and what we do isn't natural, I think the problem with thinking about things that way is that it assumes that humans aren't part of nature, but we are. What we do is just as natural to us as what orangutans do in the jungle or what a fish does in the lake. What the things we do are just stranger. So I think the reason I'm going in this direction is I think that most people, when their intuitions tell them something is unethical or something is ethically suspicious about um, genetic modifications, is normally our intuitions are being piqued by not the amount of change that's being made, but the tools that we're using to make them. People don't tend to think there's anything wrong with selectively breeding animals to create offspring in the forms that we like. Sometimes people object because we breed them into forms that have like chronic health problems or something, but that's not really objecting to the general practice of breeding new subspecies that wouldn't have existed before. But if you told people that what you did is you went into the germline, the actual DNA of a creature, and just started snipping bits out and putting new pieces in to assemble the creature that you wanted, and then you implanted that DNA into an egg and had it um, gestate into a new being, you'd have a lot more people complaining, or at least, I don't mean complaining in the derogatory sense about those people like they're whining. I mean, you'd have a lot more people whose ethical intuitions are telling you that there's really something wrong with that. And I don't know why this is, that our intuitions tend to get piqued or irritated by the tools that we use versus the amount of effect that they have. But that's just the way it is. It has something, I think, to do with this back of our brain idea that there's a limit to how much humans should tinker. But that doesn't have to do with tools. That has to do with how much we tinker. That first thing, the amount of change. Um, but all of us seem to have somewhere that little bit of intuition that says we shouldn't mess with things too much. I'd be interested in hearing why, if you think that that's true, what the justification for that belief is, what the reason is. Why shouldn't we tinker too much, and how much is too much? The guy that you heard in the podcast episode obviously has zero limits to how much he wants to tinker. Right? He wants to create humans with radically new features that wouldn't have existed before. I mean, like sort of mutant versions of humans from like 1980s comic books. Um, he wants to do anything that can come to his mind. I don't remember if they mentioned this in the podcast episode or not, but there was a girl from. It was one of the three. It was either Harvard, Princeton, or Yale, who, as her senior project, wanted to allow herself to be impregnated using the semen of a gorilla to bring it as far as she could to bring that pregnancy, let it gestate as far as it could, and then have an abortion just so that they could observe the growth and development of this thing. Obviously, no ethics review board would allow that project to go forward. It was shot down, but I'd be interested in knowing why. Why is that? Why is that a? Why would that be wrong? I'm not saying I think it's okay. And you might be freaked out at the thought that humans and gorillas can breed, but they absolutely can. There's zero reason to think that humans and gorillas could not create viable offspring. There might be fertility issues, as there often are with hybrids, but there may not be. Our genes are compatible with theirs because we're closely enough related. So, so what are the principles like in our minds behind this? I don't like leaving you just with your intuitions telling you like, oh, there's something suspicious and bad about that. I want to hear you think through the question of why something would be bad or not. Let me give you some. Let's instead of thinking backwards. So that's one of the questions I want you to answer is the why question. Why would something be bad or not? But I want to look in a different direction now and look into the future because a lot of these questions that we're asking, these sort of sci-fi questions about genetically changing humans or other beings, are not actually just sci-fi anymore. They're either current or they're imminent. So I'll give you some predictions. Um, and before I give you predictions, I'll explain why I'm giving you predictions. So if you went back 100 years and told anybody there, the smartest scientists that we had 100 years ago, what now is like, what sort of technologies we have, and what sort of ways we're applying those technologies, they would it would blow their minds. They would think you're crazy, or they would say, "Oh my God, it's not at all what I would have predicted." That's just totally not my intuitions. And if you had gone back 100 years from then and told them what 100 years ahead would be like, they would have said the same thing. So if we look 100 years from now, or 50 years from now, or 500 years from now, that pattern is going to hold up. The way the future is going to be is going to be if you could hear about it right now, it would really radically conflict with your intuitions about what the future is going to be like. And with regard to genetic engineering, the tools that we're acquiring, we've recently just in my lifetime acquired a tool called CRISPR-Cas9, which lets you go directly into the the DNA chain and snip out parts and put in new parts exactly where you want. I mean, you could get a virus. It's called a retrovirus, which is a virus that goes in and has been trained to like implant new DNA in your body and target it with. You could literally, using CRISPR-Cas9, inject a virus into a person, and it wouldn't change the DNA that they produce for their offspring only. It would change their actual DNA. You could turn a Doberman picture into an octopus over a very long period of time by just changing out bits of DNA. I mean, it would die of cancer, awful cancer between there probably, but the general point I'm making is that we can directly change an actual single organism's DNA in exactly the way we want. Now, we don't have the techniques refined to the point that we have all of the, all of the injections ready to do all the things they might want to do, but in principle, we can do any sort of genetic modification that we want. And the future is going to only be a refinement of those techniques. The same thing goes for the creation of new organs, right? Uh, it's much it's a much better research project instead of trying to figure out how we can get more people to donate organs to just figure out how you can grow new organs, right? How to take a sample of somebody's DNA and grow a new liver for them that matches them. There's lots of research being done into this right now, and there's every reason to believe the research is going to be successful. There's also research being done, not just research, but actual practical applications being done right now to create new kinds of artificial organs. There's a design for an artificial heart that has been implanted into at least one person, and it works using a turbine instead of, how your heart pumps blood. Instead, this has a little turbine, a little fan that constantly pushes blood through through your body, um, instead of sucking in, pushing out, sucking in, pushing out. It's just a constant flow, which means the person who has this has no heartbeat. It's a much more effective design. It breaks down much less often. Sorry. I always record these lectures after I eat, and I feel like I'm just going to let loose some disgusting burp one day, and you're all going to hate me. Um, so there's every reason to believe that new organ designs are going to uh, be, refined more and more as the future goes on. Especially because it's just so hard to get a new heart. Like, it's easier right now when it comes to the heart, at least, to create an artificial one and put it in a person than to get a new heart from somebody else. And once we start going down that road far enough and start refining the designs, we have to ask, how much can we change the human heart? Like, does the artificial version have to work the same way as the one that we make, or can we make a better one? What if we make a heart and we realize, oh, we could also put a filter in this that would filter out the toxins in your blood, so your heart is sort of doing the same job as your liver and kidneys. Now you have this like dual purpose, combined purpose organ. Is that too much of a modification of human nature to start creating new kinds of organs for us? Why or why not? I mean, if it extends life, it seems like it has a good effect. Interesting piece of trivia, by the way. Did you know the person who invented the artificial heart is also the person who did the voice of Tigger in Winnie the Pooh? No shit. Look it up. Going forward. So, I said I was going to make some predictions um, about the future and try to get your ethical intuitions about it. And I tried to lay some groundwork to make the case that whatever an accurate prediction for the future would look like, it's one that would not jive with our intuitions about the future right now. The way we imagine the future is not a good predictor at all of what the future will be like. So any accurate prediction about the far future should sound crazy. That doesn't mean that every crazy prediction is a good one, but it means that every good prediction about any changes in the future will probably be one that surprises us or makes us balk a little bit. So here are my predictions based on research that I know, the work that is being done, and the rate at which this work is being done. Prediction number one. In 250 years, there won't be any humans. Or at least, there won't be any humans that are biologically um, natural like ours. You got your genes just because they're what your parents had, right? I think in 250 years is we're certainly into the territory where people's genes are not just a product of their parents, um, parents having sex and their DNA splitting and combining. Our genes are going to be a product of choices that we're making, choices that parents or the government or medical communities are making about what our bodies should be like. Also, throughout your life, you will be able to modify your own genetic makeup in ways that suit you. Um, that seems inevitable to me. The reason it seems inevitable, the reason all of these things seem inevitable to me, is that once they become possible, even if people think that there's something wrong or ethically suspicious or dangerous about it, the, the promises and benefits of these possibilities are just too great for the whole world to turn them down. Somebody is going to take that bait. And once somebody has started doing it, it's like Pandora's box. The bell can't be unrung. You can't get the thing back in the box. Once people start doing this, it inevitably spreads. So, every reason to believe it'll be possible, and every reason to believe that somebody will start doing it and that it will become, uh, to some degree, popular. So, I think in 250 years, no more genetically natural humans. In 500 years, I don't think anything that even resembles a human will exist. I think that our bodies will have too many possible forms that you can take, too many possible artificial organs or appendages or ways of embodying your consciousness in other forms will be available for humanity to look anything like it does now. So we're probably in the last millennium of the existence of biological humans. Um, well, the extension of life is another thing that I think is going to change. Just seems obvious from the work that's being done. So I would put all of my money on a bet that the first person to live to 200 has already been born, and that the first person to live to 1,000 will be born in the lifetime of that person who's going to live to 200. There's just no reason to think that, as I said in the very early part of this course, that death is inevitable and that we have to only live a certain age. And I can look at the rate that our biological technology and our biological research is going, and it seems very clear that within the next 100 years, certainly, we will have the ability to eliminate the vast majority of biological causes of death. So, this is something of the future, I think. Or I can guarantee you, even if none of my predictions are right, whatever the future looks like, there are some drastic changes to human biology and to human nature that are going to take place. I mean, we already have so many. If you get Parkinson's disease, we turn you into a cyborg by going into your brain, cutting out a part that's defective, and replacing it with a microprocessor, a little computer chip that does the job that that part of your brain would have been doing, but does it right. And that little computer with the software on it updates via Bluetooth. So people with Parkinson's who have this brain implanted, little computer implanted into their brain, can sit there with their shaking hand, and then when they turn the computer on, it just stops. And then when we get the next version of the software out and ready, it simply connects to the internet and updates the software. And while it's updating, you get the shakes, and then when it's done updating, you're back. This is real. I know somebody who has this implant in their head. Well, they're dead now, but not from Parkinson's. Um, so the things that already exist are crazy and are changing human nature. And the way that um, medical advancements tend to go is that if something starts out as a therapy but has all these other benefits, it eventually becomes an option that's available more widely, electively, right? So you can think of um, plastic surgery, right? The history of plastic surgery starts with fixing people who have been injured in war to the point that they are so disfigured that they can't live good, normal lives. They can't go out in public. As a matter of fact, there used to be laws called ugly laws that prohibited people who had terrible disfigurements or injuries from going out in public because it was just too disturbing to people. The last one of these ugly laws in America was in Chicago, and I think it was eliminated in like the 1930s. So don't quote me on that. It might be the 1890s. But either way, these laws used to exist, and plastic surgery is the very infant version of plastic surgery arose to help people regain an appearance that allowed them to take part in society. It was only for people who've been injured very badly. But now you have a whole industry of surgery that you can just go get done to you to make you look the way you want. Some of you have probably had it done. I have at least two people in my life who have had um, surgeries to make them look ways that they want to look when they had no physical or medical problem with it, right? And you can imagine all of our technological, biological advancements going in sort of the same way. I mean, if we create an artificial heart that works perfectly and isn't susceptible to heart disease, and we start giving it to people whose hearts are failing, pretty soon people are going to start saying, if you have better hearts available that aren't going to kill me. I mean, heart disease is like one of the top 4 causes of death in America. Like, I want one. I would give up my heart right now if I could have an artificial heart that would work better. No brainer, right? So that's a change in human nature. You no longer have a pulse if it's a turbine heart. That's no living human has not had a pulse in all of human history. That is, if that's not a change in human nature itself, I don't know what it is. If having a computer implanted in your brain that takes over and does some of the work that your brain has failed to do isn't a change in human nature, being able to update your brain through Bluetooth, I don't know what is a change in human nature. These changes are only going to get more radical. So I want to ask, um, if your moral intuitions are tingling on this and saying, oh, God, there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable. There's something morally wrong with that. We can't do this. We can't go this far or open this box. I want to ask you to think through and give some answers in your journals to the question, what is the limit? Specifically, where do you think the limit is? And why do you draw the limit there? You don't have to be able to like completely defend this. This isn't like a debate you and I are going to have. It's an exercise in articulating your own views and getting them more refined and stronger and being able to understand how your own thinking is working. And you never understand your own thinking until you've articulated it out of your mouth or writing on a piece of paper or typing it out. So this is sort of an exercise in moral self-evaluation too. Why your intuitions go there. And if your intuitions are telling you like, no, we can do whatever we want. You want to have an arm growing out of your forehead? Like, yeah, do it. Let's go. I think you need to back it up a little bit because you definitely don't want unlimited genetic enhancement just for the reason that what if somebody wants to make themselves a dire wolf and walk around eating on people and stuff? Or like, what if rich people get to make themselves super duper intelligent with some costly genetic enhancement, and then you can't get a job because the people who have the genetic enhancement, get all the jobs for being smart or whatever. Like if you can't think of reasons why this is dangerous or risky, then you've not thought enough about it. I'm pretty sure though that everybody listening to this has at least some degree of worry, some degree of intuition that tells them there's got to be a limit to how much we tinker or what tools we use to tinker. So in your answers, tell me where the limit is. Why is the limit there? And think in terms of whether your limit is a limit on how far we can go, or what tools we can use, or a combination of the two. And try to articulate to yourself why you think that. What justifies drawing the line there? Why is that a good line to draw? That's your assignment. Your proposals for your final projects, I think, are due today. Get it in, ASAP. It's really more about you knowing what you're doing and not having to just crap something out the night before, because that's, you feel ashamed, and I'm disappointed in you if you do that. And I don't know how you could bear me being disappointed in you. So it's really about saving you that existential pain. So if you haven't done it, get it into me, just in an email. Tell me what you're going to do your project on. I think paper 2 is due. Let me look real quick. Might already be due. Assignments. Second short paper prompts. .pdf. Due date Monday, November 9th. Oh, it's not. Okay. So you got 4 days left before your second short paper is due. So if you haven't started that, now is the time. And as always, do not ever do any assignment like this in one sitting. It will never be good, and it will only make you miserable. All right. I'm about to sign off. I was looking for my phone to see if we know who the president is. I hope you're all doing well. I know this is a stressful time for you. I know things like this create strife between family members and things, and some of you are going through that, and some of you are just stressed out and you're conflicted in your own mind, or worried about the state of the country. You're not wrong to worry, but don't despair. Remember it. Never despair. There's a place in you that you can find and go to where you can feel some degree of peace and hope, and find some reservoir of energy to still be a good person and to show kindness to the people that you encounter, even if things are looking bleak. And so I encourage you to try to find that space inside yourself and live out of it. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you next lecture. Bye.